That's a lot to take in, isn't it? Yeah, there's a lot in that interface. And we're only about halfway there in the grand scheme of things. But there's always more, and there will always be more. As long as Ecamm evolves, the user interface is going to evolve. Now, I try and keep this series current with the current version of Ecamm, the most current release version. There are, of course, beta versions, and I'm keeping abreast of that. But you know, sometimes there may be little inconsistencies that I might be like, well, I'm not going to update the entire training series just for this one little change in the user interface. But for the most part, it should all be the same. If you notice any inconsistencies or if you have any questions, just contact me on support and I'll be more than happy to step you through it. All right, so this lesson, lesson 4, can you believe you're almost a third into the lessons, and so that is pretty impressive. Now this next lesson will be about how the user interface behaves based on the input it receives from you. So what to expect when you're using Ecamm, and this is going to be the highlight of this particular series. I want to make sure that anything that Ecamm does, you know why it's responding the way it's responding, and that makes it a lot easier for you to go, what just happened? So we'll do that. You're making great progress. Keep it up. Let's get going. Okay, first things first, we're going to wipe out the scene that we created yesterday. So the best way to do that, because we only have one scene, just hit the trash icon and say delete. And it's gone. And then remember, click your camera overlay here, pop that in, and it should pull in the last camera that you had, which should be your camo cam. And if it's not, you might need to go into camo. I noticed I had this problem this morning with camo running. If you go into device, make sure it's set to your iPhone as your device. Okay. So I've got my scene up here, and this is just so you can see me, a bigger version of me, instead of the little tiny, it's actually going to be over here, a little tiny thumbnail, right? So I'm just going to make it big screen. And this is so I can talk to you as well. All right, so let's go into this other area around the main window here. This is called... It's called window controls. If you go into the window pull down menu, you will see hide main window controls. Normally I turn these off. So it's basically command tilde that'll show and hide those. Right. And the reason why I get rid of them is because when I'm doing scene layouts, I don't need those. These are for quickly bringing up specific user panels around the screen here. So for instance, this one is going to bring up your switcher, your camera switcher window, which we don't need because we got one camera. And then the next one will be overlays. And then you'll have your show hide sound levels, and I've already got it right there. So if I toggle that, you see it'll pop up. So if a window appears to be lost, you may want to toggle it first, and if it's still not showing up, what you can do is you can go to the window pull down menu and say arrange all windows. Boom. And this will bring up everything again, which I'm not fond of. I wish it would just remember what windows are open, but I didn't write the software, so I'm going to turn off my comments and turn off interview mode and turn off my camera switcher, but I can click that little button right there and that goes away. So, and I'm going to get rid of activity monitor. We talked about that in lesson 3. All right, so we've got our display set up. We've got all these other windows here. So this one is, I think if I was going to use any one particular button, it would be this one here. It looks like a magic wand. This is your camera effects button. So the camera effects window here, this is where you can affect what's happening inside the specific camera that you have in your scene. So you could have lots of cameras in your scene, Right now, I'm only working with the camo camera. So, for instance, if I have a green screen set up, now I've got a little bit of a gap here. But if I turn off green screen, look what I got. Boom, right there. So if I turn green screen on and I actually have a green screen behind me, I can use a background. And you can see Ecamm does a pretty good job of getting rid or separating the green screen from the foreground here. And with just some minimal adjustments, you can adjust things like the fade level here. So if I go too strong, start to disappear like Casper, but if I go too light, you can see that that doesn't work as well. So you got to pick about midway. Sometimes you can go, I'd like to get it right about the point where things start to go too far extreme in one direction or another. So in this case, you can see I've got mine set to 48. I could set it to transparent, which means there's nothing back there. You can choose a background, for instance. So let's say I wanted to use the same background that I'm using for my desktop. I could go back to that folder here and let's see, where did I put it? There it is. I was just in Louisiana and I was at a friend's house, which is this one here. And boom, I can drag that in as my background. And now here, you can see I've got that as my background here. So I could pretend as if I was in Baton Rouge again. Now, obviously, you want your green screen to extend all the way over, or if you hold down the Option key like we were doing in the last lesson, you can resize this. And yeah, there's a little bit of a halo around me. So, you know, if I start to dial this in a bit, maybe I can get rid of some of that a lot, but then I start to see things happen right here around the microphone. So, you know, you can definitely play around with these settings. I wouldn't necessarily use a green screen unless you had a place that you really don't want people to see. This is a green screen from Elgato. It is quite literally, it's a pop-up screen just like that. If I were to zoom out of my camera here, I believe I could do that. Can I zoom out? Yeah, you can see off to the side here, there's my camera. So I'm gonna go back to my original setting. And well, we're not going to use zoom and pan, so we'll just turn that off. So this is how you would use green screen. Now, again, through the magic of recording, we're going to return to our normal location in my studio. Ta-da! Okay, and then also I can set this guy back to that. So green screen, that is an option, and I think it's better than most of the camera-generated effects. Sorry, Camo. Sorry, pretty much every other application that tries to mimic that stuff. A green screen's almost always going to get you a better effect. You have to make sure your lighting is good, though. Again, I have all my lights set up here, so the more I'm separated from the green screen and the colors that I'm wearing are not bouncing green around, the better everything's going to look. Okay. And again, if I go back to green screen and turn that on, you can see I have, instead of transparent, I can blur the background and I can also mask the edges. So these are settings that you might want to play with. A lot of people, there's a few folks in the Ecamm fam that actually will, believe it or not, they will make the entire room green, and then they're on this huge virtual set, and it's interesting. There's a lot of lighting in there, and I don't know what their electrical bill is, but it's definitely something that if you can set up, trust me, it costs a lot less money and a lot less headache to get a nice scene organized behind you than to spend time trying to get it to somehow work with a green screen. That's just my personal and professional opinion. So I'm going to turn this guy off. All right. Zoom and pan underneath here. Now, if I look at that, if I turn that on, I was just using it actually, but you can see I can zoom in. Now this is the optical zoom that I was talking about in Ecamm. So you would use this instead of using what's inside Camo. What's cool about this is that if let's say that, for instance, I set this to a circle. And instead of the classic, we'll go to circle, right? And now if I go to zoom and pan, I can zoom in on this circle, and I can also, move inside that circle space. So it allows me to kind of control my placement a little bit. And if you have multiples, for instance, if I go to square and I use my option key and I reset these settings here, right? I can now play around with zoom and pan. So I can zoom in on my face and just have that. And then I can pan around inside the image, which is pretty cool. So if I just wanted to have this, or let's say when you're doing an interview and you have your guests come in and they are way out, they're way smaller than you, you can zoom in on them. And if they're way too big, you can zoom out on them too. So that's what you would use zoom and pan for. That is on a per camera basis. All right, let's go back to, so you can undo as much as you want. So this is not so obvious, but you'll see there's a picture settings text here, and then there's a little drop down. And if you keep hitting it, nothing happens. I'm not sure why that is, but if you scroll, just use your scroll wheel, your mouse, your trackpad, whatever, and scroll, you'll see there's a whole host, and I'm going to drag those out. This panel alone can take up the entire right side here, but this is here where I can adjust the brightness of my image. I could go in if I wanted to make it a little bit cooler or a little bit warmer with the temperature settings. I could tint towards magenta, or I could tint towards green if I want to look sick. Saturation, how much saturated do I want it to be? And then finally, gamma settings. So gamma is it is essentially, it looks a lot like brightness, but it's not technically brightness. Normally, I would tweak these settings only if you can't get your picture set up right with your camera and your physical lighting. This is designed to make little minimal changes to your image if in the event something changes, or you are going to be doing something, you're going to be in a location where all of a sudden your lighting's off and you got to make some changes. Beneath that, there is a select LUT. Now, what is that? Select, a LUT, I've mentioned this in a couple of lessons. A LUT stands for lookup table. And essentially, it's a way to colorize your image. It's a way to enhance certain RGB values, and it's a way to, say, mute other RGB values, or just give your scene an overall look. And so you would use a LUT if you're trying to achieve a certain look. These are looks that you would not necessarily, it's like looking through a filter, I guess. That's the best way to describe it. Now, my buddy Marshall, who is a contractor for Ecamm and has done a lot of designer work for Ecamm, has come up with some what he calls live LUTs, and I have volume 1, he's got a couple of others, and you can see these are some of the looks that he's got here. So cozy, Chaplin, vintage, Shark Week, and Rover, and then you've got warm winter here. So let's say that I wanted to use one of these. Let's go back to that and see what we got here. Let's do something fun. We'll do cozy, okay? So I'll click on cozy.cube, and I should be able to drag it in. Oh, no, you can't drag and drop that one. So that's fine. I'll just drag it from my Finder window. I don't know if you knew you could do this, but if you have a Finder window open and then you have an open window, if you just drag into that open window, it'll automatically navigate over to the window from the other Finder window. That makes sense? So you don't have to go click, 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 click. If you already have that window open and you can't drag and drop, just drag the file over to the open window inside Ecamm, and it'll automatically, the Mac will automatically navigate to that directory. So I'll click on Cozy and see what happens. So, okay, this is what Cozy looks like. Now, I have others in here. For instance, if I go back and there's some what's called Phantom LUTs. And these are kind of interesting. Phantom LUTs, they have, like, for instance, he's got this Eastman, which is Eastman Kodak. If I click on a LUT here, and I'll drag this one in, the Eastman F, click that, and you can see now it's a lot more like film. And you can keep playing it. So if I wanted to go with like this Eastman RM, blah, blah, blah. So that one, it remembers your place, by the way. So I don't know why I was getting ready to drag and drop, but let's go Eastman RM. Here we go. Right. And so this is going to severely change the look of your image. Not something I'd recommend doing in most cases, especially when it involves you. But again, if you're trying to achieve a certain look, like there's a lot of LUTs that will do like a cyan and beige or off orange, off white color. And I don't even know if I have one of those laying around. Let me see if I've got anything here. Yeah, see, I've got all these weird ones. I don't even know what half of these are. LUTs are, I look at LUTs as kind of a crutch if you're trying to achieve a certain look. See, this is this creative look one. So if you're trying to achieve a certain look, you can use the LUT. If you don't like the LUT, or if you want to mix it in, that's what the slider underneath is for. So if I slide this down, you can see I can mix in a little bit of the LUT with the live image or not. Or if you just want to dismiss it entirely, click the X next to the select LUT button and it goes away. Some other options here. Again, you saw this in Camo. A lot of these things exist. Mirror the image. I tend not to do that. Ecamm handles that just fine. And now you can see that's backwards. I don't like that. Even looking at myself in the recording, it's backwards. So I'm not going to turn on mirror. But let's say you had a camera oriented in a certain way and the camera is maybe upside down or it's angled in a way that a mirroring operation is going to make the image look better, and you're not concerned necessarily with legibility, but you're concerned with the image kind or the image look. You would use a mirror for that. Black and white, self-explanatory. I can go into black and white mode. I use this look when, for instance, I can just turn this on for one scene. So it's not going to necessarily change all the instances of this camera throughout all my scenes, but it allows me to set like before my show starts. We had our countdown yesterday. Before my show starts, I have other cameras set up. And then I use black and white combined with the blur effect, right? And then I can drag that. And now you kind of see that I'm doing something in the background, but you can't see a whole lot of details. This is something that I use. It allows me to, get myself ready for a podcast or for a show, and people can't see all the details. So if I've got something hanging off my nose, or I've got a piece of food or something caught in my food storage face, that I can see that myself before other people see it. So obviously sepia, if I turn off black and white, sepia works. So if you're going old school, you can do that. Notice that if black and white is on, sepia does not work. Okay. And black and white override sepia. De-interlace. Now, you don't often have to use this, but if you are using a interlaced source. This is really like old camera styles that are sending an analog signal to your Mac. You would use deinterlace and it would do its best, because the way interlacing works, for those of you who were not around in the, well, prior to digital TV, it used to update every other line. And so that's how you got every other line receives a refresh, and then it comes back and does the next refresh on every other line. And the way that looked when you pause something is you'd often get a slight split in the screen if there was a lot of motion. So deinterlace works to minimize that, and so you can use that if you need to. The rotate function, same thing. If I have a camera, for instance, if I had a keyboard camera looking down on my keyboard, but the camera itself was upside down, I could use rotate to get that, and I wouldn't have to use any of the camera's functions. I would use it in Ecamm. Finally, you can apply all these effects to all the scenes that are in Ecamm. So let's say you've set up everything. You're like, gosh, I wish I had changed the color here or there or whatever. You still can. You can go to any version of this camera and click apply to all scenes, and it'll copy the settings that you've got in this particular scene and to every other scene, and where that camera exists in every other scene. And then finally, you can set this as your default camera. So every time you pull up a new camera instance using the overlays button here, it'll pull up this camera as your default camera. And if you only have one camera, this is good to do. Okay. All right, so that's the camera effects. Let's go back to this here. Underneath that, it should be obvious that that's your music panel or sound effects panel. And then underneath that is, come on, this guy right here. That is your comments window. So when you go live, it will, if I toggle this on, you see comments and reactions. So as people are commenting during your live stream, you'll see those comments appear here. You don't have to necessarily have another computer running with your show where you can respond. You can certainly do that, but as the presenter, you can respond directly to comments here and also send out comments. So if you want to say, hey, for those of you who are just joining us, be sure to check in and say hi, and we'll give you a welcome type thing, you can put it inside this comments window here, and it will show up as your username. If you're doing an interview, and we will get to the interviews in a later lesson, but if you're going to do interviews, that's the window for interviews. And since it's off right now, you don't have to worry about it. Now, interview is a pro level feature, as is LUT. Interview is something that I would recommend if this is one of the main reasons why you're going to this course. Go to the interview lesson as soon as possible before your trial expires. Once your trial expires, you're kind of losing access, but you may be able to get access to the basic features, or you may only be able to purchase the basic features for now due to budgetary constraints. Whatever the case may be, you just want to have access or the ability to do this interview section. It's not hard, but I want to make sure that you understand what it goes into setting up an interview. And there's also things that exist outside of Ecamm as far as like setting up checklists and making sure that everybody's on the same page prior to you going live or prior to you recording. And by the way, I do most of my interviews pre-recorded, and then I will play them back during a live stream. That way it allows me, to edit the recording. If for some reason somebody coughs, something bad happens, something unplanned happens, I can edit that out, because when you're live with a guest who's unfamiliar with or not used to being live, you'll know it pretty quickly. And a lot of people are also kind of averse to knowing that they're on camera and they're being broadcast to the world. So go figure. So you want to maybe consider recording your interviews with inexperienced interview guests, you may want to consider recording those ahead of time and then integrating them, playing them back during your live show, if that's the way you're going to do it. And we're going to have some lives in here, and they'll be recorded, obviously, because this is a pre-recorded tutorial-based series, but I could just as easily do it live. And then finally, this is your preferences. So you've got, you can do a keyboard alternate for preferences, which for most Mac apps is Command, comma, right? You can also click the gear icon. That will bring it up. And you can go to the Ecamm Live pull-down menu and select preferences there as well. So this is a perfect time to talk about preferences. Now, we might have left... Oh, no, we were in the video tab. That's right. We were in the video tab. So yesterday, remember, we were in the video tab and we disabled our built-in camera. Let's go all the way back to the general tab. Now, there's a lot to click through here. And again, going with the mantra, learn by doing. Some of these things we're just not going to touch. I'll be more than happy to talk about them, but they're also fully documented online. And they're pretty self-explanatory, but there are a lot of presets that you may not know exist that would help you through your Ecamm usage. So play app sounds. So if you have comments coming in or things that are happening within Ecamm, it'll play the application sounds. This does not include the sound effects. This is specific to like alert type sounds. Animated reactions. This is it's inside comments and reactions. When the reaction arrives, it'll show up as animated in your window. You can show your camera switcher in the main window. Okay, just leave that off. We're never going to use camera switcher here. We're going to only call up what's called the camera switcher here. We're going to leave that. We're going to bring that up when we need it, but I would not put it inside the main window. It's just, it will actually show up in this main window and overlay a bunch of other stuff. It's distracting. So leave that off, and that comes by default unchecked. Show program window while in other apps. Well, that's duh. Okay. You can either hide that or have it show while in other apps. Now, program window is a little bit different from what you're seeing here. So if I go to window here and select program, now this is what you would see if I were to go live. So this will stay up no matter what if you have that box checked. Generally speaking, I only want to have this window up. I will put it like in my teleprompter window or something like that, so that I can see the program while I'm doing things and I'm kind of looking at myself talking, kind of like I'm doing right now. So I just leave that unchecked for now. If you find that you need to have another instance of your program showing up in a window, which is basically what the audience sees, you can tell it, show program while in other apps. Keep utility windows in front while live. I generally leave this on because utility windows are all these panels around the edges here. Why do you keep those on? Because you're controlling your show. So if something needs to change, you don't want those disappearing because, for instance, if you want to change scenes, or if you want to hide or add an overlay or change overlays or something like that, you want to have those windows up. So I would leave those on. So you always want to have access to those utility windows when you're doing live. At least for me personally, I just find that that's the way to go. Underneath there, clicking utility windows. And by the way, we're not going to do this for every single panel up top. That's, you fall asleep, I'm sure. So some of these things we'll go through as we use them, but these are things that we've already talked about. Clicking utility windows brings Ecamm Live to the foreground. So let's say I'm inside my Finder window and I click on the utility window, it brings the entire app to the foreground. That's pretty much all that is. Automatic overlay alignment. So there's sticky and snappy. Play with both. You can also, when you're moving things around, if you don't want to snap to something, hold down the command key, and that will allow you. So, for instance, let's go back here real quick. If I'm moving this guy around, you see the little snaps appear, right? Maybe you don't want that. You hold down the command key, and now they go away. That's what that's for. Okay. And let's see. When returning to live mode with unpublished changes, revert changes. We'll get to that later on, live mode versus preview mode. We have automatically hide comment overlays. So let's say somebody does comment. One of the things that you can do is you can choose to show the comments on screen, which I think is an incredible feature. You can pick and choose which comments you want to show on screen simply by clicking on them in the comments window. So let's say somebody makes a comment that adds to the conversation or is funny or is productive or whatever. You can hit that comment and it will then appear in a small little like sub window where, well, actually it can appear anywhere, but if you're doing your layouts right, it's going to be somewhere where it's not interfering with you, but it is viewable to the audience. And what this setting does is it'll automatically hide after so many seconds. So if you want to leave it up and then you can click on the comment again and it will hide, that's totally up to you. It's something that I guess it depends if you're in the kind of situation where you're going through comments quickly and you want the comments to go away. You don't want to have to keep turning one off and then turning one back on. That's a good reason to have this little timeout variable. Discrete graphics card, I would generally leave this off. This is, the reason I've been told this is if you have like a MacBook Pro or anything that has discrete graphics, which is essentially a separate graphics card, but it's still integrated into the what they call logic board, motherboard for you old folks out there. That's what you can select this, and it will actually use that graphic card to drive the main display. Generally speaking, you don't have to do that, and from what I've encountered in the past is that it just causes problems. So, but that said, you may be instructed by Ecamm support to enable this option to troubleshoot some problems you may be having with the speed of the updates on the displays. So just, I would leave it off in the meantime, but if you need to put it on, you can do that. And that's kind of the general settings. Of course, also you can check for updates here, which of course is also in the pull-down menu, check for updates. So if you can't find it one place, chances are in Ecamm you can find it 12 other places. The account setting, this is what we logged in with. If you're on a trial account, I'm already on my annual plan. And then your streaming size. Okay, so I'm not streaming right now, but if I were, right now I have it set to 1080p. 1080 is kind of what I would suggest as being the default for most of your streams, but you can go higher. And we'll have a whole discussion about this when we get into the live broadcasting section. But for now, just leave it set to 1080. You can go as high as 4K. Just keep in mind, when you do that, you increase your bandwidth requirements significantly. So, for instance, I can see down here, this is a neat little tip. Down at the bottom here, let's see. You can see here it says required for one destination, right? And if I set this stream size now to really high, it goes up to 7. So that's no big deal. But if I go to 4K, I'm now at 15. So I've doubled, and I've actually tripled where I was from 1080p for one 4K stream. So if I'm doing 3 4K streams, I'm going to need almost 50 megabits up. That's my upload speed in order to get this. Now, for most people, you're going to be well within that. Like, for instance, my speed test result, and Ecamm does this. It conducts your speed tests in the background when you first start, and you can always test again if you want. This is a good way to see what your internet connection is giving you. And if you're somewhere off-site, if you're somewhere where you don't necessarily know what the internet connection speed is a good place to start. Okay, and then let's do this. This way we can just navigate. And if you want to see me, I'm right here. I haven't gone anywhere. So, and my hands are still here too. So same thing also happens if I increase my frame rate. I don't recommend, you can go up to 60. I'll just say that right now. You can go up to 60, but look what that does also to my destination. We'll cover this again, like I said, when we go live. This will be largely based on your camera's output and, of course, your internet connection. So we'll leave this set to 30. 30's, I mean, for most stuff, 30's fine. As a matter of fact, most films are still recorded at 24 frames a second. Videos generally 30 frames a second, or technically 29.97 frames per second, but we'll just call it 30. High quality video mode, a higher bit rate. Essentially, Ecamm's always going to try and give your audience the best looking stream possible. If, however, it can't or it shouldn't be trying to do that, you can uncheck this box. And the same thing goes for audio. You can go to a lower bit rate. I do not recommend it. Just leave these set on. You'll be fine. And then, let's see, we'll go over to recording. And this allows me to select recording options. So record all broadcasts. That's what we're going to do. And I'll get into all this other stuff when we talk about more advanced settings later on. But this is when you're recording your broadcast, specifically down at the bottom of this screen here. See if I go here. I can choose my recordings folder. And this is where your recordings will get stored automatically. And this is what you want to modify based on where you want the files to go. And this is a setting that can change. It can change based on the type of show you're doing. And I'll explain that in the last little option that we'll discuss for this as part of this tutorial, and that is the profile section. It'll give you 3 seconds before you start recording. So if you click record, it has nothing to do with going live. This has everything to do with, if you're recording, kind of gets you 3 seconds to get ready because it's going to start recording. But again, if you're editing your video after you've recorded it, then you don't really need the countdown. It's totally up to you. All right, let us go back over here and we'll see. Destinations we'll get to later. This is where you're going to stream live to. Your video settings. Now, we did touch on this in the last lesson, disabling the built-in camera. You can see also the default source mode. We set it to blank. You should have set it to blank. I'm in a firm blank camp here. That's just the way I am. Default transition, cross dissolve. There are built-in transitions that you can use. Cross dissolve is probably the most utilized one. Can you create custom transitions? Yes. Would I recommend it? No, it's not something it's more of an advanced type of feature in that you would have to create the transition with scene A and scene B in another application and then use that to go between the different scenes here. So I wouldn't recommend that. So just leave it set to cross dissolve for the class. If you want to play around with different settings, this is a default transition. So let me point that part out. Is default transition means every scene you create, remember, a scene is a collection of overlays. Every scene you create will have this default transition applied to it. But every scene you create can have its own transition changed later on after the fact. This just ensures that everything is using the same one to start. If you don't like any transitions, you can say no transition and just go flip. It'll just go right to the next scene. I leave it set to cross dissolve. It just looks better. Fade out when finished. So when I am done recording all of these lessons, by the way, you may notice that it fades to black. That's because I have fade out when finished enabled, and it just automatically does that. You can turn that off and then add in your own fade later, but that's only if you're doing editing. It looks much more professional, especially when you're live streaming, to fade out when finished. So I would fade to black. I just leave that. Autoplay video files. So this option is that if you put video files inside your scene, it'll automatically start playing them. I am on the fence about this one. I think it's based on whatever you're doing, whatever the show is for, whatever the podcast or whatever the presentation is for. So if you switch to another scene, for instance, like if, let's say you're doing like a quick cut scene, you've got like some kind of, I don't know, somebody that you want to put in like a little funny scene real quick. You can cut to that and it'll automatically play the video that's in that scene. And then you can have that immediately go to your next scene if you wanted to do that. So it just takes, if you're not going to do any post editing, this takes some of the work out of some of the workload off of you and puts it on Ecamm. Picture-in-picture above overlays. If you are going to be using picture-in-picture, it'll put it above everything else. This is not a feature we're going to talk about right now, but this I just leave it set to check. I don't use picture-in-picture really all that much. Same thing with show picture-in-picture, new video file. I don't use these features. Show NDI and siphon titles full screen. So NDI is Network Device Interface. It was a technology that was invented or produced by NewTek and has been made mainstream. And it's designed for more professional setups that are working on discrete networks where the only traffic going on that network is video switching and sending data across specifically for a broadcast. NDI does work in low traffic networks, but anything less than, say, 1 gigabit internal network, I wouldn't even bother. It's just not worth it. Trust me, because when I was setting up this lesson, I was going originally to use NDI to take my screen sharing that I've got set up here and put it on to the screen you see here. But it didn't work well at all. It was very choppy, whereas this is much smoother. You can see this is through the screen capture. We have disabled built-in camera. Let's leave it. We don't want that FaceTime HD camera. We're not using Skype, so we're going to just leave that off. Your audio. So what are you using for your audio? So this specifically is your speakers, right? So what are you playing back through? So I can say, like I'm using the Rode microphone. So the Rode Connect is what it's defaulting to. I'm gonna go back to MacBook Pro speakers. And then so audio is a whole nother entity in and of itself. Because it's not visual, it's sometimes hard for a lot of users to understand the concepts behind where audio is coming from and where it's going to on a media platform like Ecamm. It's not that hard, but it does take some knowledge, some background knowledge. And so echo cancellation generally refers to when you hear an echo, you hear your voice multiple times. This is most prominent when you have external speakers, and it's not really echo, it's more of what's called slapback, where you have external speakers that are playing. Let's say you have an interview guest, and that interview guest is playing through in my case, my MacBook Pro's speakers. Cool. But my microphone is also right by the MacBook Pro speakers. So guess what happens? An audio loop. So This is most common when the person on the receiving end of the interview gets audio from you. They will hear themselves and then they will hear you, and it's often them repeating themselves or some kind of time delay. So you can use it, but this also only comes on in certain scenarios. There inside the sound levels box that we looked at earlier, there is an option. Just click this on if Ecamm is detecting a situation where it could cause the slapback or the echo. You can also enable echo cancellation. So it says here, pick this option only when using external speakers. There's a reason why most of us podcasters that do video podcasts either wear these, or if they're really savvy and they don't want to look like they're air traffic controllers, well, these days they don't wear those, but they have these little things. They're called in-ear monitors, and these look a lot like wired up AirPods. And these it's about a $25 investment. I'll post a link to it. I recommend these because then you don't have to mess with any of this stuff. And then your guest for interviews will absolutely want something like this, because then sometimes the devices that people use have echo cancellation built in. For instance, if you're on your iPhone and you've got it in speaker mode, you often notice sometimes when you're talking, you can't hear the person talking, and vice versa. That's because the echo cancellation kicks in and essentially turns off somebody's microphone so that the sound can get through before the microphone's turned back on again. So that's echo cancellation. If you want to broadcast your system audio, use this very carefully. This is the next one down. Broadcast system audio when sharing the screen, all the time or never. I have mine set to never, because this will broadcast everything, every single app on your Mac that produces sounds will go through your Ecamm stream. Generally not a good thing, especially if you have something running in the background that you don't want other people to hear. So I would advise against it. And let's see here. Automatically mute microphone and guest audio during video playback. Okay, so if you have interview guests coming in and you decide to pop on a video and that video's got audio, it will mute both of you so that there's no, let's say you're having a discussion and you don't want people to hear that discussion. You can mute the audio right here, and then none of your audience will hear anything going on. If you're blowing your nose, if you're typing on the keyboard or whatever, if you say to automatically mute the microphone during video playback, it will effectively mute the microphone. But as soon as the video's over, the microphone comes back on. So just remember that. Mic delay. So if you notice, for instance, I'm talking to you right now. Now I'm going to look at myself in here. So if I go 1, 2, 3, I may be a frame or two behind, which to me doesn't really do much. I mean, you're seeing it and it's probably not distracting for you. If it is, I'm sorry, I'm not changing it. But this allows you to set a little bit of a delay between your microphone and then also the video. So if there is an offset here, it'll help create that offset or minimize that offset. If you're doing recordings, the easiest way to fix this is just record as is and then go into your editing software and then just step the audio over until it's perfectly synced, because the audio track and the video track are separate, so you can manipulate them independently of each other. There is an app, there's a website and an app that I will place links to for this mic delay to make it real easy. But a real quick way to do this is that if you're recording and you clap like that, and then you stop your recording, and then you pull that into your editing software, you can see when your hands hit and when you hear that noise, you can see, is it right on? Is it a couple of frames before, or is it a couple of frames after? That's the easiest way to do it. And then you can just dial in your delay here. Mapping your input channels, 1 and 2 to left and right stereo. These are, this is, generally speaking, you're not going to be using stereo sound in your broadcasts. If you're doing music and things like that, yes. But for your microphone, trust me, I've heard a couple of people go live with their mics on stereo mode. They'll actually have, like, I've got a second mic here, right? So if I put these two side by side, I could say that this is left audio, and I know it looks right to you, but this is left audio and this is right audio. And then when you're listening to me and I do this or I do this, it's going to change on your speakers. And unless you're watching a movie, it's really weird. So I would leave that off in most cases, but there are some instances where you would want that to be that way. That's a preference thing. But if you only have one mic, you don't need to do this anyway. Mute movie sound on speakers. This is if you're playing back that movie that I was talking about. If you got a scene with the movie in it, it's got audio. This will mute it on the speakers. And that's generally a good thing because you don't necessarily need to hear it. But in most cases, especially if you're looking off of the screen while the video's playing, you need those audio cues to remind yourself that you need to get back in front of that camera because the movie's about to end. So that's something that I would play with on an as-needed basis. And then system output mix mode, I wouldn't even play with this unless you've got like an external device. Like I have a Rodecaster Pro 2, and I sometimes use a system output mix mode where I'm able to control my mixes on the Rodecaster Pro 2 instead of doing it or having Ecamm handle that. So it won't mix the different channels. It'll be split up it'll mix the channels on your mixer instead of doing it in Ecamm. Okay, interview mode we'll get to. That is something to happen a little bit later. Screen sharing mode. So we did a little bit of screen sharing when we did Activity Monitor. This one, include your desktop icons. You can hide this stuff. So you can turn off your desktop icons, your desktop picture. You could add a margin when you're zooming into an app. And then do you want it better quality, higher frame rate? Usually I let it set at better quality. Personally, I think that is going to give you, you're looking for presentation, and the quality of the presentation is going to be affected if you start setting it towards higher frame rate. So that's, again, it's personal preference. If you like, oh no, I need to have a higher frame rate. Let's say you're sharing a screen from a game and you need to have a higher frame rate than what is being sent to your audience, you can set it to higher frame rate instead of the quality. Include your mouse cursor. So if you're doing anything on the on screen sharing and you want people to see where your cursor is, what's a little bit different than what I'm doing right now because I'm actually streaming all of Ecamm over to the other Mac. So I'm not doing screen sharing per se, but this is if you are sharing a screen, you can say include mouse cursor, and then you can also show mouse clicks. This is really cool if you're doing tutorials. So you can increase the size of the mouse and you can show the clicks. So it'll give it like a little halo when you click. And then finally, show everything when sharing the entire screen. Now, of course, that means what's on the computer, not you. So it'll basically include everything that's on your desktop, on your Mac. everything. It says right here, it says this mode will include Ecamm Live in the broadcast and will not hide the desktop or desktop icons. Okay. So shortcuts. This is where you're going to trigger anything that's on your Mac OS shortcuts. To be honest with you, as you can see here, I don't use these and I don't think they're necessary. But if you want your Mac to trigger some event when you stop a broadcast, when you start a broadcast, let's say, for instance, you want to set your lighting and you're using something like the Philips Hue system, which you shouldn't be using if you're doing video, by the way. Use video lights that are tuned correctly to the refresh rate of your camera. But if you're starting out fresh and that's all you can afford right now, that's fine. Just keep in mind that you might see some flicker. And there are ways to combat that through the cameras, but just it's better to not have to deal with that at all. But in any case, you can do a bunch of different things, like Super Chat arrives. So it says do nothing. Now, I know some of my fellow Ecamm users have the Mac play like a sound and say, the Super Chat, by the way, is when somebody's chatting with you on, say, YouTube, and they send you a little donation as part of their chat to you. That's called the Super Chat. And you can have your Mac trigger events. You could have confetti play or whatever, sounds and things like that. It's not always reliable, so I don't even bother with that. I mean, for me, I'd rather have it tied to, something on my Rodecaster. And if I see the Super Chat come up, I can do like do I have sound effects on here? Let's see. Yeah, like I got the air horn here. Right? Or I can do. So I can do that. I trigger that. I don't have to worry about Ecamm taking its time to do that. And then finally, remote control. Allow the apps below to control Ecamm Live on this Mac. Now, part of another course that I've got underway right now and will be available if it's not already is how to use the Elgato Stream Deck. The Stream Deck is a piece of software or an actual physical product that allows you, essentially acts as kind of a glorified keyboard where you take keyboard commands, shortcuts, scripts, a bunch of different things, and you integrate them into a single button, and that button controls those events inside Ecamm. So, for instance, I can show you. I have on my my iPad mini right here, I've got the Elgato. This is an Elgato product as well. Trying to restore my previous connection. Well, maybe I won't be able to show you. Oh, there it is. So you can see I've got all these buttons here. Now, these are things I configured so I can have the Ecamm show if I press a button on here, or if I press it on one of their physical products that actually has physical buttons you can press instead of these virtual buttons. It allows you to. It's just a way easier way to do things. They also have pedals, and there are other products out there in the marketplace that also have similar types of capabilities that you might want to look at. But I do like that. For instance, I like the pedals. I haven't purchased them because I've gotten mixed reviews from people, and the one thing that I don't want to have on my live stream audio is me stomping on a pedal trying to get a scene to advance or go back or whatever. So I haven't invested in them yet. And at some point I'll probably try them, but Elgato makes them and they're part of the Stream Deck ecosystem. And that represents Ecamm Live preferences. It's a lot to take in, huh? That is a lot of stuff. Okay, so we're going to quickly go through the pull-down menus because we are at a grand total of an hour on the second part of the user interface. And I want to make sure that we get through this before we start diving into the next lesson, which is actually designing our scenes. Okay, so I said I was going to talk about profiles, and I'm not going to forget that because we're going to do it right now. So what is a profile? A profile is a container for scenes, which are a container for overlays. So if you think profiles, let's do it this way. Profile is the root of or the base of your tree. The trunk is it, and all of its branches are the scenes, and then the foliage that grows on the outside, all the sub branches, those are your overlays, and those are all tied down. It's kind of like a family tree. The profile is the grandpappy, the grandmama, and a lot of people liken it to a house, and that the scenes are rooms, and that the inside the rooms you have furniture. It's basically container, container, container. Kind of like those dolls, that pop out of it, the big doll. It's kind of like that. So this is the biggest version of that doll. This is the profile section here is where you would go. So right now, by default, there is a default profile that's created by Ecamm. Anytime you create content that's going to have its own unique traits, and when I say unique traits, I also mean like what we were doing in preferences, recording locations, certain settings, those types of things. You want to have a new profile for that too. For instance, I've got 3 different shows that I do. So I load up a different profile for each show. And you can see here under this particular part of the menu, you can see I've got new blank profile, duplicate the current profile, export, rename, and then what the current profile is. So a new blank profile, well, that's pretty straightforward. That just creates a new blank profile. The duplicate current profile will take your existing profile and then create a duplicate of it and then disassociate the two. So you're not making changes in the original profile. This is perfect if you have templates set up. So a lot of the users I know, and this is one of those businesses that I've always wanted to get into, but I feel like templates are pretty specific and unique. And I know that Ecamm as a company is looking into having some very basic things. And that's all I was looking to do anyway. So I'm not getting into templates at the moment, but never say never. So a template would be great. It's like every show you start is going to have this type of scene, this type of scene, this type of scene, this type of scene. And then all you're doing is you're customizing the look, the graphics. So that's how so you would load up your template profile. You create a new profile, call it template, and then load that up and then say duplicate, and then it would give it a new name. And then you would be working in the new profile based on the current profile. Exporting. Okay, so exporting, you can actually take a profile and export it over to your Macintosh desktop or wherever you want to put it and share it with other people who also have Ecamm. So if you create a profile and you're like, hey, I made this for everybody who's going to be using Ecamm in the company, or or in this case, if I wanted to get into making templates, I could export that template as a profile and then share that online. And then you would simply double click it and it would get loaded into Ecamm. It's pretty simple. You can also rename the current profile. So let's say you bring in my profile that I created and it's called Jeremy's Killer Template. And you want to rename it to, I don't know, Boudreaux's, I'm Cajun, Boudreaux's current profile. Then you could do that. So sorry, you're going to have to deal with Cajun and Louisiana references throughout this training series. We're proud of our heritage. So let's get out of that. And then scene, this is basically the same settings that you would adjust inside the scene profile. So lock is always going to be lock. You can switch between scenes. You're not actually hiding scenes. Remember, scenes contain the overlays, which can be turned on and off, but you can only display one scene at a time. So in the next lesson, we're going to create an opening scene, then we're going to create a main scene, and then an outro scene. Those are 3 different scenes, and they all have their own overlays in them. So this is how you select those scenes. What is nice for this, as you can see, if you learn keyboard alternates, you can see there is a duplicate current scene, which is that same as this guy right here. So new, duplicate, create a group, create what's called the timed group. And we'll get to those in more advanced topics. But these settings allow you to, for instance, the time stuff allows you to step through scenes on a timed basis. So for instance, I had 3 different scenes set up of different camera feeds from different locations, and it was automatically cycling the entire scene at a given interval. It would just kind of stay in a loop there, and it worked. It worked really well, actually. Source we've already done. You can select video files here, and let's see, we've got our camera settings. So we're in. This is actually considered camera A. That is your camo camera. And then all the other cameras that show up here. Add guests is if you're in interview mode. And we'll get to these later. If you have any network cameras that are for some reason compatible with Ecamm, they'll be under manage network cameras. I have not, in the time that I've been using Ecamm, I have never, ever heard of one person using network cameras. So if you find yourself using them, I'm sure the people at Ecamm would love to hear from you, because I don't think there's a lot of testing going around this. You can select all your cameras and then what to include in your switcher. So for instance, I am not going to use the Elgato virtual camera. So I'll go turn that off. And let's see, my phone is going to go through camo, so I'm going to turn that off. Video Pencil is an app that I'll show you later on. It's really neat, actually. It's like a telestrator a la John Madden style. You know, this guy goes here, this guy goes here, and boom, you know, that kind of thing. You can do that inside Ecamm. It's really cool. Microphone. You can pick your microphones. Remember that we could also pick that right here. So you could pick your microphones from this list. Overlays is the same as the overlays panel, and this includes both navigation of the overlays and then creating overlays. Remember I was saying about you could add comments here. This is a placeholder comment overlay. We'll add that in the next lesson, and you can see how it works. Recording, record all broadcasts, which is what we have. Save photo. Okay, so save photo will take the current image that's inside your main window and save it. It's a screen grab utility. So if you're trying, this is really good for thumbnails, by the way. Let's say, you know, you wanted to demonstrate, for instance, like the features of my microphone. I could get behind here and kind of give it this pose, or do like this, or, you know, something like that, you know, whatever the YouTube trend is these days, you know, like, you know, whatever. You could do all kinds of things, and then you just save a photo of it, and then you can have something to work with your thumbnails. Showing your recordings will bring up the recordings folder. Again, you can choose your recordings folder from here. And inside Ecamm, as of version 4.2, they have now integrated a third-party service called Scenery, which is a online-based collaborative editing tool. I have personally not had any experience with it, but essentially it allows you to do editing similar to what you would do in, say, CapCut, Final Cut, DaVinci Resolve, Adobe Premiere, but you do it online, and it is a pay by, I believe it's a subscription service, but it has some AI tools in it, and you can send your recording directly up there as soon as the show's over and start editing on it and working with other people on your team to edit that file down. So let's say you do your recording and you've got your editor standing by. He can go in and start hacking away. He or she can go in and start hacking away. Your output, video monitor. So if you are outputting to an actual video monitor, and when I say video, I mean HDMI monitor, you can, it'll show up here, and then you can say, turn on, flip horizontally. It hasn't found any display right now. audio monitor, do not even use this. This is the only way that I would ever use this ever again is if I was not getting any audio for some reason, because what happens is the audio goes through your mic, through whatever interface it's going through to your computer, through Ecamm, and then out to your headphones or your speakers. There's always a delay, and it's super distracting. Imagine trying to talk to yourself and you're hearing your exact same words a second or two later. It becomes impossible to have a conversation. So I don't even bother with this. I'm not even going to demonstrate it because it's not something that I would recommend. There's always going to be a delay. If you're going to monitor your microphone's input or you're going to monitor the output of Ecamm, I would do that at the audio level and not at the software level. That's my personal position on that. NDI output, remember I talked about network device interface. Here you can use Ecamm to output to NDI, which means there are other NDI devices on your network. It can receive the Ecamm broadcast, which is great. So if you're trying to grab the Ecamm broadcast and do something with it, you can. So let me show you what I'm talking about here. I know I mentioned this just briefly, and so I've got that app Video Pencil, right? So right here, I'm inside Video Pencil right now. I'm going to set this output to be 540p, and then I'm going to choose my MacBook as my source. So now you can see here I am, right? See right there? That's me. So now if I draw on here, you're not going to see anything on the Mac just yet. But let's say, so now I'm using the NDI output from the Mac to go to my iPad mini. I'm actually watching my Mac here, and I'm watching the main feed. So then I could go in and create what's known as let's see here, we'll tap on this and we'll create a Video Pencil camera. So if I select Video Pencil camera, and now I'm looking at myself here, of course I've got my Apple Pencil here, and you can look here, and then you can look down on the screen here, and I'll draw, right? There I am. So I've drawn it on the iPad, and then I see it right here. So again, going back to what I'm saying, if this guy goes here, and that guy's there, and this guy goes here, and that guy goes there, they're going to make Jeremy's head go boom, right? And you can set up things like, if I wanted to, for instance, change the thickness of the pencil or the pen. So if I wanted to go like this and change the color to red, I can do that. This is just a demonstration, guys. If you have specific questions about this, I can always provide you with more information. But this is a way, I'm sure a lot of you are going to be interested in doing something like this. And so NDI is going to be the way to do it. You send NDI out from your Mac. It goes into your iPad. Your iPad allows you to draw on it. And then you bring in the output from your iPad as a camera source inside of Ecamm as an overlay. And it's automatically transparent. So it looks exactly like this. So if I want Video Pencil to go away, I can simply click on that camera. Boom, it's gone. So NDI can be a lot of fun. But again, this is on wireless. If it's on USB, it would perform a lot better. So the name of the product is Video Pencil. Again, I'll provide links to this stuff. I think Video Pencil is very useful, but it's something like anything else in Ecamm. It can be overused, so you have to be careful. All right, other things under options. Deck link output, unless you're using a deck link, which is an external device for doing video capture, you don't have to worry about this. Your virtual camera. Now, this is important. Virtual camera, let me go ahead and zoom in on this part of the interface here. virtual camera is a way to broadcast the Ecamm camera to other applications that accept camera inputs, like Zoom or Teams or meetings, or other applications that can take Discord. If you're using Discord, for instance, it will take your Ecamm output. So rather than just having this frame or this, well, not going to have this frame, but if you're, rather than just having an image like this, you can embellish it with all of your Ecamm settings, all the tunings of the camera, the brightness, the color, the LUT, if you want to, all that stuff. And that'll be your camera source in those other applications. And that's cool. So virtual cam, I have it off right now because I don't have this thing connected to anything, but we'll get to that. Same thing with virtual mic. You can send the output of your microphone to any other application and use the Ecamm mic as your mic source for those applications. And we're not doing the sharing window, so we're not worried about this. And they even say that, because nobody uses it, what's this? So I'll leave that to you to figure out what that is. Stream size, we already had set that up. Stream shape, normally, unless you're going anamorphic, wide 16:9, or if you are going tall. Tall is for something like it's Instagram, YouTube Shorts, Facebook stories, whatever, you could go to the tall aspect ratio. And what that'll do is, let me get out of the screen here. You can see now it's set up. Well, why am I shrunk down here? Well, if I go under options and I tell it show vertical safe zone, and it'll give me a warning saying that this is what it is. You can see now Ecamm has fit. Do you see the gray bars here? This is what would be sent over to your vertical application. Now, can content exist outside of it? Sure. But this is your safe zone. So this is what those applications are expecting is inside this area. So I'll go back to output. I'm sorry, options, stream shape, wide, and then turn off my safe zone. I can tell it to show picture in picture, but I mean, this just allows you to pick another camera to show here. I set up my scenes to be my own picture in picture, similar to what you're seeing here. I've got down below, and then I've got off to this side, I've got the main screen. I don't do this picture in picture thing like they have here. So, but your mileage may vary if you decide to use that. Under options, there are other settings here. If you're doing picture-in-picture shape, your transition, remember I said you could set the transitions different from the default transition. So right now, default transition is set to cross-dissolve, but you could select other ones. We're going to take care of that in the next lesson. When the video ends, loop the video. Now, this is when the video that you're working on in that scene, that is the video that it is referring to. So when the video ends, what happens? Do nothing, loop the video, go to the next scene, or end the broadcast. So let's say you have an outro video, and then when the outro video is done, you want to stop the broadcast, you can just say end broadcast. When a scene starts, you start from the beginning or the last location. Last location means if you're stepping through a scene and whatever configuration you have that scene in, it'll remember that, and then it'll go back to that last location, specifically the video. Crop the split screen. We don't have to worry about that. And then live demo mode. Now, live demo mode's cool. You're actually kind of viewing a version of it right now, but live demo mode, if you're doing a live stream of Ecamm, under live demo mode, if you're actually want to show what you're doing inside of Ecamm as part of your presentation, you turn on live demo mode. Window is pretty much all the things we've already discussed. You can hide the main window controls, which we've done. Like I said, I like to keep those off when I am doing my layouts. I've gotten used to not having them on, and matter of fact, even on the screen that I'm recording on right now, I don't have them on. Now, let's see if I go back to arrange in front, bring all to front. These are all standard Mac OS things. Arrange all windows. Remember that we did that at the beginning of the lesson. I can also hide all the utility windows. So this is nice because then I'm just left with this. All right, so let's say I'm just working on overlays. I can go to the window pull down menu and select overlays, and then that's just me and overlays. That's it. That's how that would work. So sometimes you might find yourself hiding all the windows, all the utility windows, and you can see there's the keyboard alternate for that. Shift Command H. You have your bandwidth statistics, which you can bring that window up, and it'll show you if you are streaming, this stat window will be live. If you're not streaming, it won't. But you can see here I can rolling required bandwidth, average throughput, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of stuff here. Really what you're looking for here is any kind of warning signs that your stream may be impacted. More often than not, your viewers will tell you through their comments, hey, you're choppy, or hey, I can't hear your audio. And then you can go look at this bandwidth statistics window and see what's going on. Camera effects we did. Camera switcher. The camera switcher is this guy down here. Since we only have one camera, I'm not going to belabor this particular point here, but the camera switcher is when you have multiple cameras set up inside Ecamm. And we can take one iteration of this camera and make multiples of it. Call it camera A, camera B, camera C. And that's a little bit down the road, but that allows us to set up different settings for each window. So you could have me or you as normal camera, then one is black and white, one is sepia, one with pixelated version, one with the brightness and contrast all out of whack. You could do all that stuff in a single scene from one camera, and that's where you would set this up. This would be your sources here. So camera A. If I wanted camera B, for instance, to be my if I wanted it to be my video pencil camera, I could put that here as well. All right. And let's see, we've already done comments, interview. Interview chat is when you chat between yourself and the interview guests. Main window, we've been looking at it this whole time. Network cameras, we don't have any, but that would bring up if you have any network cameras, ones that work off of Ethernet, they'll show up here. Overlays, that we've obviously touched on those. Preferences, we've done ad nauseum. Your program window, we've clicked on that. Scenes, we've done. Sound effects, we've done. And sound levels, we've done. So all that's left at this point is for all of us to just cry, help, help. There's been so much to cover. So I will say this, though. This is the point at which you might find yourself starting to get overwhelmed. Take a deep breath and just understand that this is just an application. Again, you can't break it, but it does have quirks and behaviors that I would consider to be non-standard. This doesn't look like any other application you've probably ever used in the past. And yeah, just similar to like other applications in this field like OBS, the user interfaces are non-standard. So it takes a little getting used to. That's fine. If you experience any technical difficulties, though, your best line of defense is just go to contact support. And everything happens through both email and within Ecamm, which is really cool. So when you're contacting support, you'll be able to do it directly through Ecamm. It goes right to their support lines. The user guide, this will actually take you to their website, and you can see this pretty much all the online documentation that Ecamm has. Some of it's up to date, some of it isn't. So for the most recent stuff, you want to also be checking Facebook, Discord. That's going to be your place for the most recent information if it hasn't been updated here yet. And let's see, we don't need Safari stuff. Wow, that's it. We covered the whole dang thing, guys. Congratulations. We just went through the entire Ecamm interface in only 3 hours. No, seriously though, there's a lot to take in here, and we really haven't started using many of the features yet. Ecamm can be a very deep product. It can also be a very shallow product as far as your ability to use or your need to use certain features. So I would recommend that if you're going to be playing around with Ecamm at this particular moment in time, that you can start to go further into like playing with overlays and, you know, maybe bringing in some of your own sounds. For the purposes of this class, you don't need to worry about copyright issues and things like that, because this is for your own personal use. But anything that you're going to broadcast out for the general public to see, better make sure you either have permission from the copyright holder or don't use it. Just don't use it. Trust me, as somebody who has received a copyright strike, it's not a fun thing to have happen to you, and it can take you off your game when all of a sudden YouTube shuts you down for a period of time because it says, hey, you violated somebody's copyright and here's where you did it, and we've removed that file from your stream. It's like, wow. And by the way, you can't live stream for the next week. Whoa. So if your entire business depends on it, it's not worth taking people's copyrighted material. So for the purposes of the course, play around, just play around. And okay, so then in the next lesson, we're going to cover creating a scene. Now, fortunately, this next lesson is not as detail-oriented as the interface lessons are because, quite frankly, a simple profile with 3 scenes, there's only so much you can do. But we're going to keep building off of that profile. We're going to keep adding to it. So when we do interviews and other things, we're going to keep building. So be prepared, be ready, and we will get cranking. We're going to create some of our own custom graphics too. And if you don't have access to certain types of content creation tools, Ecamm has a lot of great built-in content creation tools like the shapes that we saw, sounds, those types of things. If you're looking for something a bit more specific, Adobe Express has a free and a paid version. There's also another product called Canva that has a free and a paid version. Obviously, the paid versions offer more features. They call them pro level features. Either one of those will allow you to create some more custom graphics that go well beyond what Ecamm is capable of in-house. But just keep in mind that if you are making that content outside of Ecamm and you need to make changes, you need to have access to that content after the fact. So don't go sign up for a demo version that's going to be deleted after 7 days, because then all your files, all the work that you may have done on that particular application in the demo mode will be gone, and we don't want that. So, all right, well, that's it for now. We'll see you in lesson 5. Thanks again so much for being part of this. I really, this application is so much fun to work with, and sometimes I find myself wanting to keep going, but I know, like anybody else, sometimes you just take a break, absorb what you've learned, and then move on from there. And that's what we're going to do. So we'll see you in the next lesson. And yeah, definitely go take a break now because you got a lot going on up here in this gray matter. All right, take care. Bye.